Merci.
Tonight, our featured artist is Julie Lillis, an essayist, a poet, and a short story writer. Her work has appeared in the Christian Science Monitor, Grown and Flown, Months to Years, and Brevity's nonfiction blog. It's my pleasure to bring to you Julie Lillis.
Bed made and dishes washed, I stared at an unblinking white screen. I frittered away the morning, answering emails and writing faraway friends. I needed to do that, I told myself, just like I needed to bake the apple pie that now simmers in the oven. Sometimes I think I am a genius at procrastination. But eventually I am left with nothing to do but write. My dad spent nearly 50 years as a journalist. His longtime editor at the Christian Science Monitor used to say, "The story doesn't care," as in, the story doesn't care that you are famished or have writer's block, that your sources haven't called you back. The story just wants to be told. I used to think that a real writer needed her own room to write in, that without a dedicated space, a writer could not write. I made my share of pilgrimages to the homes of writers just to see these rooms. Standing in O. Henry's little house in Austin, I closed my eyes and imagined him easily churning out the gift of the Magi. I felt the same sense of inspiration at Emily Dickinson's, Louisa May Alcott's, and Lincoln Barnett's. In Tarrytown, New York, in the house I lived in for nearly 20 years, I emulated these writers by turning a tiny bedroom into a writing room. I paired an old maple desk a friend's soon-to-be ex gave me with a black swivel chair from Staples and plopped a desktop computer front and center. I painted the walls linen white, festooned the 2 windows with cream-colored curtains, and hung up my favorite art and talismans. All writers have those. A pastel drawing of the woods by my daughter, a portrait of my husband at a squirmy age 4, a photo of his mother on her wedding day, and one of my grandfather beaming at my cousin's wedding. A hand-carved African sculpture my student Edwin and his dying mother gave me on his graduation day, with a touching note from them on the back. A little painting of Jesus that my husband bought me in Greece. Everything was carefully curated, visually interesting, and all mine. No sooner had I decorated my lair than my family wanted in. Soon I discovered the evidence. My messy husband's Latin books strewn across my neat desk, a laptop of teenage origin, and dirty espresso cups nestled atop my journals. I did not like these incursions one bit. I tolerated this briefly, then rechristened my office the only child room, announcing to my family that only children may use it. In other words, me. Surprisingly, this strategy worked. My family stayed out, and my writing life returned to a peaceful new normal. I resumed my morning routine, waking before the birds and retreating behind closed doors to think and write. This was not an easy task, as Mother Nature continually beckoned to me. Looking out the window by my left shoulder, I could smell the woods that crept silently to the back of the house. I could see the oblong patch of brambles and wild raspberries that I tried to keep weed-free. Raising the window slightly, I could hear the crunch of deer hooves on dead leaves and the agitated chirping of blue jays whenever my cat Rocky lurked nearby. I could look out this window forever. But the story didn't care about the performance art living in my woods, about the raccoons and possums and deer who called it home. It didn't care about the raspberry patch or the sun filtering through leaves in the summer or the birds' nests above my sightline. To my right, another window of magnificent procrastination. Two towering Douglas firs, their boughs waving like choir robes in the breeze, and under them a splintery deck for lounging. I longed to be out there, sitting in desultory silence while the sun filtered through the pine needles, inhaling the gentle scent of lilacs that surrounded the deck like a stole. But the story didn't care that the sun beckoned like a siren song, that Rocky lay waiting by my favorite deck chair, that my garden called out to be weeded in the morning. Sometimes I long for that little room. I moved away 3 years ago into my parents' house in Maryland. There's no room for an only child room here. No room to decorate with talismans. No room to be only a writer. My old house is no more, too, razed to the ground one summer to make way for an apartment building. So each morning, I sit on a Victorian love seat in my new bedroom, laptop perched on my lap, notes and drafts strewn to my left. I answer email, text my kids, and wait for the washer to finish its cycle. I may not have the woods calling to me, but I always have my chores, and the house is never cleaner than when I want to write. But the story doesn't care. It doesn't care that I miss my writing room, my house, Terrytown. The story calls to me, but it is not patient and will leave angrily if I don't obey. So I've learned to listen, to dash to the computer when the muse overtakes me. And I've learned that a writing room does not make a writer write. A writer can write anywhere, on anything. I've written poetry on planes, scribbled essay ideas on cocktail napkins, jotted down notes on cash receipts. I can even write in my little bedroom, snuggled between dirty laundry and a flat screen TV, and the story doesn't care.
Tonight's featured artist is Alice Stevens. She was among the first wave of transracial adoptees from Korea and is the author of the novel Famous Adopted People. Her work has appeared in publications including LitHub, the Los Angeles Review of Books, The Margins, and Banana Writers. She is the editor of Bloom and writes a column, Alice in Wordland, for the Washington Independent Review of Books. Recently, she completed a novel based on Japanese-American artist Isamu Noguchi's internment during World War II. It's an honor to welcome Alice Stevens.
I had recently completed a historical fiction novel based on the visionary Japanese-American artist Isamu Noguchi's internment in an Arizona camp during World War II when news emerged of a deadly new disease in China. After dithering and denial, in order to distract the public from their own mismanagement, our alleged president and his minions began to call the coronavirus the China virus and the Kung flu in an eerie echo of the prejudice and hatred that was whipped up against the Japanese Americans after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which resulted in an entire ethnic group being interned in America's most desolate hinterlands. Here is the beginning of my novel called Light Off Objects. May 22nd, 1942. Finally, they came. Since early afternoon, everyone had been on high alert, but as happened so often in Poston, the news of imminent action was soon followed by delay, and more delay, and then more delay. Now it was hours later, and the late spring sun which had been growing ever bolder in the weeks since the first pioneers arrived to build their own internment camp, gilded the expectant faces as it made its long descent to the western horizon. "I see them," Megumi announced, standing on her tippy toes, shading her eyes against the piercing light as she squinted into the distance. Glancing at her wristwatch, Lavinia said, "Phone call from the train station said they should start arriving at 1400 hours." It was 4:15. "The optimism of the U.S. Army is what's going to win this war," Isamu muttered. Overhearing him, Martha Hudson uncrossed her arms and puffed out her sweat-glazed cheeks to full capacity, glaring a pointed rebuke at Isamu. He ignored her, not on purpose, but because she was dull and unattractive, and so simply did not register upon his consciousness. The windshield of the lead truck glinted erratically in the sun, a magnificent plume of dust rising in its wake, burgeoning into the crazed blue sky, erasing everything that came behind. Isamu lingered on the dust rather than the truck, fascinated by the physics of its fulminations. Already he was fighting a panicky and entirely novel suspicion that he had made a grave mistake by coming to Poston. This feeling was like a sharp blade that cut deep into the hard knot of unease twisting his entrails ever since the news of the bombing of Pearl Harbor had crackled over his car radio as he was driving down to San Diego, the wind in his hair, his thoughts entirely concerned with the onyx that was awaiting him at the stone suppliers, and whether it would do for a bust of Legere, whose opaque and yet deeply mesmerizing character would be perfectly captured by that dark, lustrous stone. Ah, how the light would gleam from that black head, Isamu was thinking, just as he realized that the radio announcer was speaking with uncharacteristic urgency. He turned up the volume to find that the war had finally reached America's shores. Not that it was unexpected. Everyone knew that the world was on fire. But as long as America stayed out of the fray, one could continue on with the fantasy that war was a distant problem of little immediate consequences. No more. It was the worst possible news that it was Japan and not Germany that had struck the decisive blow. For so long, he had managed to live outside the dull, plodding lives of the average person, escaping just at the right moment when life threatened to ensnare him into a routine, a single persona, a template copied over and over again. But this time, his flight took him straight into the jaws of history. He had thought that by following his conscience, which had heretofore always led him down the right path, he could pry those jaws wide, but now he feared they were snapping shut, and history would swallow him whole. The first truck ground to a stop. The welcoming committee protected their faces with hands, hats, and scarves as the dust enveloped them, shutting eyes and sealing lips tight against the grit. After only a few weeks, the newcomers had learned that defending against the sand came before the social niceties of bright glances and friendly smiles. Isamu was surprised that the vehicle was an army truck, a tattered tarp the only protection against the sun and sand for those crowded into the back, the lucky ones sitting on benches around the sides, the rest standing jammed together with nothing to hold on to but the people next to them. "I thought they were coming in buses," he commented. "Transport requisitioned the buses ages ago, but they have not arrived yet," Lavinia said, a hand cupping her face from the sand. The driver sprang from the front cab and sprinted to the back to open the metal gate and assist people from the truck. A small cluster of soldiers who had been standing at attention stepped forward, gripping their rifles with both hands, while the welcoming committee crowded around to assist the weary travelers in the long drop to the ground. Wade Head, director of the Poston War Relocation Center, solemnly shook the hands of the arrivals as they trickled out to stand stunned and uncomprehending on the shimmering, shifting sand. First out was a man in a wool suit, clutching a Homburg in his shaking hands, the paper tag around his neck fluttering in the breeze. His hair was gray, and so was his face, and he looked as if he was recently roused from his deathbed. The next man was also in a suit, his hair gray as well, though he had a strong, youthful body. He reached up to help a woman descend, her skirt rising as she was lowered from the truck, with the same white hair and sickly pallor as the other two. Then came a young boy, not in a suit, but in cuffed cotton twill pants and a tie. His hair, too, was white. He blinked dazedly in the slanting sun. Allowed to bring only what they could carry, everyone had come to the concentration camp in their best clothes. They continued to emerge from the truck like hatchlings, standing on shaky legs in the piercing sun, only instead of looking like innocent babes delivered unto the world, they appeared old, decrepit, worn, and used. The truck was not a womb, but a grave from which they had been resurrected. The next truck piled up, and everybody had to pause and cower from the malevolent tail of dust that lashed the air. Isamu watched as a boy shook his head the way a dog shakes off water, the sand twinkling in a halo as his hair turned from frosted white to jet black. "Wait, wait," Wadehead yelled at the driver of the second truck. "We'll unload this truck first, then you pull your truck up." Knowing that the people in the next truck would be anxious to get off, and that other trucks would be coming up behind them, Megumi urged the volunteers to quickly assist the people off the first truck. But it was slow going. The arrivals moved as if just awoken from a long slumber, eyes blank as glass. A few of the women had to be physically propped up. One fainted dead away as soon as her feet hit the ground. A relative stood over her, anxiously fanning her with her hat. "She needs some water," she explained almost apologetically. "We are all very thirsty. We waited on that train for hours and they did not give us food or drink." Two volunteers carried the unconscious woman off to the nearby recreation hall, people trailing after like mourners at a funeral. Last to disembark were those who had been given bench seats, the very old and the very young, the pregnant and the new mothers, the sick and the lame.
Tonight, our featured artist is Gish Jen. She published short work in The New Yorker, The Atlantic Monthly, and dozens of other periodicals, anthologies, and textbooks. Her work has appeared in the Best American Short Stories 4 times, including the Best American Short Stories of the Century, edited by John Updike. Nominated for a National Book Critics Circle Award, her work was featured in a PBS American Masters special on the American novel and is widely taught. Jen is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. She has been awarded a Lannan Literary Award for Fiction, a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study Fellowship, and a Mildred and Harold Strauss Living Award. She has also delivered the William E. Massey Senior Lectures in the History of American Civilization at Harvard University. It's an honor to bring to the hashtag 101 Nights screen, Gish Jen.
Hi, everyone. I am Gish Jen. I'm delighted to be participating in this project. I'm going to read to you from the beginning of my latest novel, The Resistors. Some of you may know this is a post-automation, surveillance state, feminist baseball dystopia. It takes place 40, 50 years from now. And it's in a society that's divided into 2 classes, the netted. That's kind of the Uber class. They're affiliated with Aunt Nettie, which is kind of a mashup between AI and the internet, a proxy for the government. And then there are the surplus, the people who are not much needed by this super capitalistic society. As for whether they tend to be of color, yes. In any case, this is the beginning of the book. As her parents, Eleanor and I should have known earlier. But Gwen was a preemie to begin with. That meant oxygen at first, and after that, special checkups. And her early mumps are bumpy. She had jaundice, she had roseola, she had colic, she had a heart murmur, things that I can now see distracted us. Especially with the one chance policy, we were focused on her health to the exclusion of all else. For the netted, it was different, of course, but for us surplus, the limit was one pregnancy per couple, and Eleanor was just out of jail. Outside the house, she had a drone minder tracking her every move. The message was clear. She was not getting away with anything. And in any case, we loved Gwen and would never have wanted to replace her, worried that we were that she was delicate, that she might never consume the way she needed to, the way we all needed to. Not that charges of underconsumption couldn't be fought in the courts. This was Auto America, after all. For all the changes wrought by AI and automation, now rolled up with the internet into the burrito we called Aunt Nettie, we did still have a constitution. And if anyone could defend what was left of our rights, it was our own fierce Eleanor, of whom even the platoons of Canada geese who patrolled our neighborhood, the pit bulls, one might say, of the waddling world, were afraid. But as Eleanor's incarceration brought home, these battles had a price, and in the meanwhile, even worrying and weighing the options distracted us from realizing other things we might have noticed a bit earlier had Gwen had a sibling. It is so hard for a new parent to imagine a child any different from the one he or she has. Children do so have their own gravity. They are their own normal. And so it is only now that we can see that there were signs. All children take what's in their crib and throw it, for example. It's universal. But Gwen threw her stuffed animals straight through her bedroom doorway. They shot out, never so much as grazing the doorframe, and they always hit the wall or the staircase across from her bedroom at a certain spot, with the precise force they needed to bounce forward and drop clean down to the bottom of the stairwell. Was she maybe 2 when she did this? Not even, although she was already a southpaw. And already she seemed to have unusually long arms and long fingers, or so I remember remarking one day, not that Eleanor and I had so many babies on which to base our comparison. Ours was just an impression, but it was a strong impression. Her fingers were long. I remember, too, having to round up a veritable menagerie on the landing before I could start up the stairs. The stuffed hippo, the stuffed tiger, the 3 or 4 stuffed dogs, the stuffed orca and toucan and platypus and turtle. I gathered them all into my arms like the storybook zookeeper of some peaceable kingdom. It was as if I, too, ought by rights to have been made of plush. Of course, our house was automated, as all surplus houses were required to be by law, and the animals could easily have been clear floated. All I had to do was say the word and the housebots would emerge from their closets, their green appendages poised to help. Clear float now? Aren't those animals in your way? And we can roll and clear if you'd prefer. You have a choice. You always have a choice. The choice business being a new feature of the program, a bit of cyber ingratiation, you might say, to balance its more habitual cyber intimidation. If you trip, it will be your own fault, for example, and do note that your choice is on the record. Nothing is being hidden from you. Your choice is on the record. Meaning that I was losing living points every time. Living points being something like what we used to call brownie points when I was growing up, except that these were more critical than money for everything from getting a loan to getting a plane ticket to getting Gwen into net U one day, should we dream of that. A goal that people said involved tens of thousands or maybe even hundreds of thousands of points. As for how this society got to be this way, I'm going to read ahead a little bit and or skip ahead a little bit to Graham's thoughts about how, this Aunt Nettie came to take over this world. He says, like others, I had allowed Aunt Nettie to keep my calendar back in the days when, as the young head of an English as a second language program, I still had immigrants to teach and obligations to juggle. This was some time ago now, back before Ship 'em Back. But like others, then, I had also allowed Aunt Nettie to email people on my behalf, checking the mimic your voice option and marveling at just how perfectly she could replicate my tics of phrasing, especially because I had, in my youthful diligence, sent so many thousands of emails. Indeed, Aunt Nettie had so much data on me that not even Eleanor could tell it was not I who had composed the messages she received from my account. And like others too, I had taken advantage of the easy tools offered to me and trained Aunt Nettie to write my lessons in my syllabi, even to generate sample sentences and punny jokes. Indeed, I trained her so well that I had more than once observed that an avatar could now run the class. As for why I did these things, I generally did them, I see now, because I appreciated some associated convenience, which was to say, because I could be, as my mother liked to say, lazy as a rock at the bottom of a hill. And as for the resulting reality, was it not disconcertingly like the sea level rise and heat and wind we knew long ago would come with climate change, but have since come to call normal? No one would have willfully chosen the stranding of whole office parks and schools and neighborhoods by the flooding we saw now. No one would have willfully chosen the generating of the places we called maroon places, just as no one would have chosen the extinction of frogs and of polar bears, or the decimation of our pine and spruce forests by the explosion in the number of bark beetles. After all, it was not the earth that chose it, or any other creature. It was we who made our world what it was. It was we who were responsible. And of course, we are now endeavoring to do something about that. Carry on all. I applaud you. I am with you. To November.
Tonight, we feature Carolina Hospital, a poet, essayist, and author of several books, including the poetry collections Key West Nights and Other Aftershocks, The Child of Exile, a poetry memoir, and Myth America, a collaboration with Maureen Seaton, Nicole Hospital Medina, and Holly Iglesias, who is another of our Scheherazade sisters. She also wrote a novel, A Little Love, under the pen name C.C. Medina. Carolina's work has appeared in numerous national publications, such as the Norton Anthology of Latino Literature, Raising Lily Ledbetter, Women Occupy the Workplace, and Florida Literature. She teaches at Miami-Dade College, where she's been awarded 3 endowed teaching chairs. It's my honor to bring to you Carolina Hospital.
Hello, hola. My name is Carolina Hospital, and I was born in Havana, Cuba. I left when I was 4, and I was raised in my childhood in San Juan, and then later as an adult in Miami, Florida. I am a college professor. I've been teaching at Miami-Dade College for over 30 years, but I am also a poet, an editor of several anthologies, and also a novelist. So today I'm going to share some poetry. I have published 7 books in total. My last 2 most recent books have been poetry collections through Anhinga Press, a wonderful poetry publisher in Tallahassee, Florida. Key West Nights and Other Aftershocks is a book that I wrote by myself. And the most recent book that I'm very excited about is called Myth America. And it's a collaborative collection. I wrote it with 4 wonderful poets, Maureen Seaton, Holly Iglesias, and Nicole Hospital Medina, who happens to be my daughter. She's also a poet and a great artist. In fact, one of her paintings is on the cover of the book, Myth America. So I'm really happy to start by reading a poem from this collection, because I love the whole idea of collaboration. This particular poem I'm going to read was in fact responds to a call for collaborative poems by a group called Poetic Justice League out of Chicago. And they wanted to put together a series called Semi-Automatic Pantoons. And this was our response to that call. America's Rifle. Gunfire is only the sound of people trying to live a little longer and failing. Ocean Vuong. Exit wound. point of departure for the body shot through. Rainbow-colored shards shift the center of gravity. No one is wiser, no one alive to claim the win. Accurate and lightweight, it's America's rifle. Rainbow-colored shards shift the center of gravity. Observe the shape of fear. Profile sleek, matte black. Accurate and lightweight, it's America's rifle. Proud protector at the ready at each and every corner. Observe the shape of fear. Profile sleek, matte black. Loaded cartridge with wasted virtue. Proud protector at the ready at each and every corner. Ear-splitting discharge and smoke screens for hidden angels. Loaded cartridge with wasted virtue. How cocksure your anticipation, how red-blooded your ear-splitting discharge and smoke screens for hidden angels. What will happen when every angel is armed? How cocksure your anticipation, how red-blooded your authority. The camera is a sky. What will happen when every angel is armed? What will happen when the sound cuts off? Authority. The camera is a sky. No one wiser, no one alive to claim the win. What will happen when the sound cuts off? Exit wound, point of departure for the body shot through. This next poem I wrote by myself, and it's a very recent poem, has not been published yet. It's called Rain is the Tear Maker's Response. Men, not all men, design atom bombs they regret and forge alliances between bishops and fascists and accumulate gold to fill a drain field, or maybe two. They make themselves feel grand because they are learned or cunning or own a semi, weapon or truck, or a woman in the back Harley. They surge over neighborhoods, the force of a tsunami or tornado. Women, most women, rail against false convictions or neglect of children, sometimes hunted down like prey. Their rage spills down hills into rivers and lakes, farms and fields. It turns into a weeping bottle brush for hummingbirds or an oak by a porch that calls blue jays and cardinals home. And I want to finish with a love poem from Key West Nights and Other Aftershocks. This is the book that I wrote by myself, and it's actually my favorite poem from the book. It's a love poem, so I can end with some love sent out into the world. It's called Gifts. I don't recall when we stopped buying them. We resist form and ribbons, roses withering into broken shards, chocolate dissolving into crevices, a bond watch, a golden bracelet, when what I really wanted to give you, what I want to give you now is turquoise, cool, wide turquoise, waves of turquoise wrapped in sunlight, tenderness coated in dulce de leche, moonlight raised on osprey wings. I want to hand you hammock laughter that can weed out sirens, our daughter's smiles unhinging history's wrecks, dewdrop wetness, and a love that binds. Thank you.
Tonight's featured artist is Maxine Hong Kingston, author of The Woman Warrior, Chinamen, and The Fifth Book of Peace, among other works. She's the recipient of numerous awards, including the National Book Award, the National Book Critics Circle Award, the presidentially conferred National Humanities Medal, and the Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters from the National Book Foundation, as well as the F. Scott Fitzgerald Award. She worked for many years as senior lecturer in creative writing at UC Berkeley. We are incredibly honored that this woman warrior has joined our army of Shahrazads. We welcome with the warmest of hearts to the hashtag 101 Night screen, Maxine Hong Kingston.
I am Maxine Hong Kingston, and I'm an American by birthright. So both my parents were so-called illegal aliens, and but maybe they were not so illegal, because in 1869, look at this treaty that was signed by the President of the United States and by the Emperor of China. The United States of America and the Emperor of China cordially recognize the inherent and inalienable right of man to change his home and allegiance, and also the mutual advantage of the free migration and emigration of their citizens and subjects respectively from the one country to the other for purposes of curiosity, of trade, or as permanent residence. Imagine that. There was a time when we, human beings, envisioned that we had a right to travel, and we have an inherent and inalienable right to change our homes and allegiance. And they had the idea of free migration, free immigration, and free emigration. I'm going to read to you a poem that is about my travels, and I'm sort of following the trail that my mother had made long ago. Once I was on an airplane beside a village girl in the window seat. At takeoff, I asked her, "Where are you going?" "Wah!" she shouted in surprise and grabbed a hold of my hand. "You speak like me." "Yes, I speak Sayup language." "Are you from the village?" "No, my mama and papa came from Sayup villages. They left for New York. They lived in New York, then California. I was born in California." I felt like a child, younger than this girl. I'm telling about parents as if I still had them. I'm talking in my baby language. "Wah!" she exclaimed, loud as though yelling across fields. "I am going to New York. I am meeting my husband in New York. He's waiting for me in New York. He works in a restaurant. He's rented a home. He sent for me and waits for me." She did not let go of my hand. I held hers tightly as we flew the night sky. She looked in wonder at webs of lights below. "Red, red, green, green," she said. "Red, red, green, green," my mother used to say, meaning, oh, how pretty. The lights were white and yellow too, and gold, blue, copper, and above, stars and stars. "Mother, Mama, as you leave the village family you've never seen again," Grandfather walked her as far as he could walk, stood weeping in the road until she could not see him any more when she turned around to look. "She's off to that lonely country from where he returned broke." I felt that I was dying. "Mama, girl, you are not traveling alone. I am traveling with you, here, holding your hand. I know that country you're leaving for and shall guide you there. I know your future. I'm your child from the future. Your husband will certainly meet you. Baba will be at the East Broadway station. You will recognize each other, though he be dressed modern Western style. You will have a good life. You will have many children and live a long life. You will be lucky. You are lucky." Your husband has work. He's rented an apartment and made you a home. He saves money. He bought your airplane ticket. He will be waiting for you at the airport. She listened to the wise old woman teaching her. But how to instruct anyone the way to make an American life? How to have a happy marriage? For a long time in the dark, dozing, dreaming, thinking, we sat without speaking, without letting go of warm hands. The red, red, green, green appeared again. I told her, that's Japan. We're over Japan now. We'll be landing soon in Narita. Wow! You speak Japanese too! She admires me too much. Inside the horrible confusion of the international airport, how can a mind from the village not fail how can a mind from the village not fall to crazy pieces? I found a nice American couple making the connecting flight to New York and asked them please to take this Chinese girl to the right gate. She thanked me. She said goodbye. See you again. Joy Kin. She did not look back. Good. Gotta go. Things to do. People to meet. Places to be. I want to say to all the newcomers who are here, who have crossed borders, I want to say welcome to America.
Tonight's featured artist is storyteller, author, and musician Heather Forrest. She's founder and executive director of Story Arts, Inc., a nonprofit organization dedicated to the art of storytelling and its educational applications. Her 17 folktale books and recordings have won numerous awards. She's been featured 10 times at the National Storytelling Festival in Tennessee and has appeared at the Museum of Modern Art, New York, the Smithsonian Institute, Washington, D.C., the Sidmouth International Folk Festival, England, and the Glistening Waters Storytelling Festival in New Zealand. She's a recipient of the Circle of Excellence Award presented by the National Storytelling Network, and we welcome to the Shahrazad's hashtag 101 Nights screen, Heather Forrest.
Here's an ancient legend told in cultures on both sides of the North Atlantic, from Iceland to the British Isles. Here's my version of a silky story called The Sealskin. It's a tale about a woman who loses her skin. The sea pounded the rocky Icelandic shore and slid like a foaming mirror back into itself. A young fisherman climbed the boulders at the water's edge. A brisk wind whipped his face. He made his way toward a cave opening, seeking shelter from the sea spray. As he approached, he heard sweet singing, drifting out of the darkness. Coming closer, he saw black seal skins draped on the rocks in front of the cave opening. He silently crept up to one of the skins and snatched it away. Clutching it tightly, he hid behind a rock and waited. Before long, beautiful dark-eyed women emerged from the cave. They dressed themselves in the sealskin and returned to the sea. One woman, however, looked about frantically everywhere. Finally, with a shiver and a sigh, she sat on a rock and wept. The fisherman's heart swelled with an unexplainable longing for that woman. His love for her swept his good sense away, and he could think of nothing but bringing her home with him. He hid her skin under some stones and approached the strange woman. She did not flee. He put his coat about her bare shoulders, and speaking only with his eyes, he led her home with him. He fed her fish cakes and warm broth. She fell asleep on his bed. The fisherman listened to her quiet, even breathing. He admired her long black hair, strewn like seaweed over his pillow. He wanted her to stay. When her sleep was deep, he returned to the cave, and he found her skin where he had hidden it, under some stones, and he brought it home with him. While the beautiful woman slept, the fisherman hid her skin in a chest and locked the lid. The key, that he put in his pocket, and he promised himself that he would keep it with him always. Days, weeks, months passed. The fisherman treated his unusual visitor so tenderly. She soon loved him, and they were married. Oh, to the villagers they seemed happy enough. But the woman never spoke, and some days she would sit for hours on the rocks at the water's edge. Her dark eyes gazed sullenly at the swelling sea. Time passed. They had 7 children. Oh, she treated them well, but every day she brought her children to the water's edge, and as they played in the sand, she sat on the rocks and looked out to sea. Her dark eyes always had such a sad, faraway look. One day, the fisherman took all the children to town. His wife had felt ill, and she stayed behind. As she gathered his clothes scattered in the rush of leaving, a key fell with a clatter to the floor. She picked it up. She'd never seen it before. She looked about the cottage to see what it could open. The chest had long been used as a bench. She pushed the key into the welcoming hole and lifted the lid, and there, in the shadows of the chest, she saw her black sealskin. A gasp washed over her like a wave. She remembered the taste of the ocean and the surging of the tides. She pried the sealskin from its hiding place, and clutching it to her breast, she ran, tripping, stumbling to the sea. Slipping the skin on, she slid into the ocean. An eerie song drifted over the waves. Some say they heard it. I've 7 children on the My heart is torn for the woes I've borne. Salt tears my choice must be. Though I yearn, I must return to my children in the sea. My heart is torn for those I've borne. Salt tears my choice must be. She never returned, but whenever the fishermen's children walked along the water's edge, they said there was a dark-eyed seal that swam close to shore, splashing jellyfish and colorful shells upon the land to delight them. The fishermen's nets were always full of cod. He said there was a seal who swam about his boat, splashing the good catch his way. Here's my retelling of an ancient Celtic ballad about a young maiden whose true love comes along on a fine white horse. But in this old tale, she saves him. Lady Janet's father warned her never to go near the well at Carter Hall, for there it was an enchanted place where the Queen of Elfland held her court. Oh, but Janet, she was a sprightly maid who followed only her own will. So she tucked her kirtle up round her waist, and she went off to the well. She went off to the well. Deep into her father's woods she ran, and when she arrived at the well, she saw that wild roses grew round it. They were so beautiful, she plucked one. Suddenly, before her stood a tall white steed, and on that horse there sat a man dressed in Elfland green. "Who bids me here?" he said. "I did not bid you visit me," she replied. I plucked only this rose." "But these are my roses," he said, "that grow round the well at Carter Hall." "And who are you?" she asked, "who stands here upon my own father's royal lands?" "I am Tamlin," he replied. "I am a knight of the Fairy Queen. Oh, I was once a mortal. I was the grandson of the Earl of Roxborough. But my horse, it stumbled in this strange place, and as I lay stunned upon the ground, the Fairy Queen put me under her spell. I serve her now beneath this well." On and on he spoke. Janet's eyes grew wide as Tamlin told her secrets of what it was like to live in the underground world of the fairy kingdom. Tamlin's eyes grew sad as he gazed at Janet's face and form. He had forgotten what it felt like to be a man, and his heart yearned for her. Well, many a day after that she returned, for her heart too yearned. She'd summon her love with a rose and stay all day till the moon was above. In time, the fair Lady Janet and the enchanted man, Tamlin, were deep in love. And so it happened. Janet's father noticed that she was with child, and seeing her widening girth, he raged, "Which of my knights has done this to you? Is he a man of worth? None of your knights is as fair or as fine as the secret father of this child of mine." "A secret father, say ye? Name him, that you might openly claim him." "Oh, I cannot," she said. "Oh, and to none of your knights will I ever be wed." "To none of my knights, say ye? Very well. Off you go. We'll find you a proper husband in Edinburgh." But Janet's heart was already pledged to Tamlin. Deep into the woods she ran, and summoning her love with a rose, she said, "Tamlin, Tamlin, come." And when he appeared, she said, "Oh, is there not a way to break the spell that holds you here against your will? Wouldn't you be the father of your own child openly?" "Aye, lass, I would. But it would take a brave heart to work the plan. Janet, you are beautiful, but are you brave as well?" "Oh, yes, that I am." "Then come close," for it was as if the leaves and trees had ears to hear. "Janet, on All Hallows Eve, the Fairy Queen will ride up out of the fairy mound, followed by her knights. I will be in the third company. You'll know me. I'll be riding on a tall white mare. One hand will be gloved, and one hand will be bare. By midnight, we will arrive at the well at Miles Cross. Hide in the shadows, and when you see me pass, drag me from my horse. Dear lass, do not let me stray. All about the fairies will cry out, 'Tamlin is away.' Oh, Janet, I fear they will turn me into gruesome things. But do not let me go until they turn my living flesh into a burning coal, then throw me into the well. The water will wash away the spell." And so, on a dark and gloomy All Hallows Eve, Janet crept from the castle, and she went to the well at Miles Cross. She crouched in the shadows, and she drew her cloak about her shivering shoulders, and she waited. At midnight she heard it, the tinkling of the fairy bells. She saw an eerie green light. Then she saw the Fairy Queen come riding, 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 followed by her knights. The first, the second, the third company passed. She saw Tamlin, just as he said. He was riding on a tall white mare, one hand gloved, one hand bare. She reached up out of the shadows, and she dragged him to the ground as all around the fairies cried, "Tamlin is away." Janet saw the Fairy Queen turn in a flash of black satin, and in a glare of green eyes. She felt Tamlin shrivel in her arms to become a slimy lizard. She held him tight. He became a coiling snake. She held with all her might. He became a bear with sharp claws, a wolf with wide jaws. She did not let go. He became a lion who pinned her roaring to the ground, but still full with belly she clung round. He became a bar of molten iron. Oh, she gasped, but did not let go, until they turned his living flesh into a burning coal. She threw him hard into the well. as all about the fairies cried, "Look, the maiden broke the spell!" And up out of the well came a human, Tamlin. Janet threw her cloak about him to hide him from their sight. The Fairy Queen turned in a rage and said, "So, Janet, I see you freed my favorite knight. Tamlin, if yesterday this I had only known, I would have cut out your heart of living flesh and given you back one of unfeeling stone. And if now I had the power, and I could, I'd pluck out your eyes for what you've seen and spoken of, and give you back ones of wood." And with that, the evil queen turned and rode off with her host. The tinkling fairy bells grew faint, as did the elfin light. But as Janet held Tamlin trembling in the dark, she knew he would be her delight. She knew he would be her delight.
Tonight, we're featuring Susan Fisher Sterling. She is the Alice West Director of the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. This museum is the only major museum in the world solely dedicated to advancing women in the arts. Sterling has built her career and the stature of the museum around the message of equity for women through the example of excellence in the arts. Among her honors are Orders of Merit from Brazil and Norway, the President's Award of the Women's Caucus for Art, and selection in 2011 as one of Art Table's 30 most influential professional women in the visual arts. It's a pleasure to bring to you Susan Fisher Sterling.
Hello, my name is Susan Fisher Sterling, and I'm the director of the National Museum of Women in the Arts. Today, we live in a world where visual images matter more than at any other time in history, and visual arts has the power to change the way we see. But to work its magic, art must be seen, and for many years we were only seeing half the picture. For centuries, great women artists have created works of profound meaning and beauty. Yet until very recently, art by women was all but missing from public display, and the stories of women artists were absent from history. My creative endeavor, the National Museum of Women in the Arts, takes up their stories, past and present. Founded 33 years ago by Wilhelmina Nicole Holliday and her husband Wallace, we are the only museum in the world solely dedicated to women in the arts. And from our home in Washington, D.C., in a repurposed Masonic temple 2 blocks from the White House, the museum gives prominence to the many fierce women artists who refuse to let society define their place. This evening, as part of the Scheherazade Project, I'd like to share the stories of 4 of my favorite fierce women who are essential to rewriting history in the arts. So who are some of these women? Let's begin by going back to the 16th century. We all know of the genius of the Renaissance man, but what of the genius of the Renaissance woman? Lavinia Fontana was one such genius. Acknowledged as the first professional woman artist of the Renaissance, she was such a novelty that she painted her self-portrait, often, as you see on the left, to prove her talent, so that people could gawk at what a female painter looked like. Self-possessed and refined, she is formidable sitting there at her spinet. Now let's take a look at the commissioned portrait she created on the right. This is most likely the young woman's wedding portrait, chock full of symbols and objects with which, if you know how to read them, are the Renaissance equivalent of a neon sign flashing your ideal Bolognese bride here. The cross symbolizes piety, the dog loyalty, red the color of the wedding dress in Bologna, Italy. The clothes and gems are typical of a wealthy young woman's trousseau and the symbols of her rich dowry. Having gazed upon this perfect example of demure womanhood, it's safe to assume that our artist Fontana was just like the woman she depicted, right? Actually not. While certainly there are similarities, Fontana did not spend her youth at home or in a convent, but rather apprenticed from a young age in her father's studio. She came to her marriage based on her talent and her earning potential as an artist. She was the primary breadwinner for her family, and her husband, a minor noble, worked as her assistant, managed the household, and acted as her agent. Did I tell you she bore 11 children in the midst of this burgeoning career? Eventually, she became so celebrated that she moved from Bologna to Rome, where she worked for none other than the great Camillo Borghese, who became Pope Paul V. Fontana was truly a Renaissance woman and the artistic equal to the Renaissance man, setting the stage for those who came after her. If Fontana was a 16th century trailblazer, then my next artist of note was a pathbreaker who broke conventions of late 19th century France in oh so many ways that are still important to us today. Opinionated, ambitious, assertive, tenacious, controversial, and unapologetic about her behavior, Sarah Bernhardt was well suited to her calling in the theater. Arguably the most famous actor of her day, it may come as a surprise that she also was a damn good visual artist, and we own one of her most dramatic works. Titled After the Storm, Bernhardt said this work represented a scene she witnessed, that of a Breton peasant cradling her grandson, who had died having been caught in fishing nets during a storm. It's up to you whether to read this image as an image of hope or of despair, but there certainly are similarities to Michelangelo's famous Pietà. However, unlike Michelangelo's figure of the Virgin Mary, the otherworldly female exemplar of chaste piety, Bernhardt depicts an old, powerful, and grieving individual, a person of this world. What inspires me about Bernhardt was her drive to be real and authentic, not just in her sculpture, but also in the way she assumed roles that broke gender and societal norms of her day. She took on leads like Hamlet. She performed Judas in a scandalous production that closed after just one performance. She fostered romantic relations with men and women, perhaps most notably the Prince of Wales and her sister artist, Louise Abema. And she had so many admirers that when she died in 1923, hers was one of the largest funeral processions in the history of France. She lived unconventionally in both life and art, and her secret passion was sculpture. Who knew? Named Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People in 2018, Judy Chicago declared herself as an artist at the age of 5. What blows my mind is how this rebel with a cause found her artistic calling. In a class at UCLA, one of her professors arrogantly and ignorantly proclaimed that women had made no contributions to history, none at all. This ignited a lifelong mission of Judy Chicago's to prove him wrong. How did she do this? By creating feminist art in 1969, by making a name for herself in the male-dominated art world, and by reclaiming women's history. Those became Chicago's intertwined causes. Judy is one of the artists I respect most because she turned the testosterone-driven machine aesthetic of 1960s LA art into works like Pasadena Lifesaver Red No. 4, works that combine personal experience with overtly feminist imagery. These lifesavers mark the beginning of Chicago's use of what's called central core imagery, the representation of female genitalia and, by extension, sexuality through color-filled images. In these spray-painted works, her aim was to create the illusion of shapes that are vibrating, dissolving, opening, and closing. From here, I'll let you draw your own conclusion about why she may have called these images lifesavers. This was the beginning of the artist's long journey to create the iconic sculpture installation known as the Dinner Party, a monumental work of art where great women throughout history are finally given a place of honor at the table. At the Women's Museum, we celebrate Judy Chicago's career up to and including the Dinner Party and the 4 subsequent decades in which she has created art that speaks to women's rights as human rights, including the rights of Mother Earth herself. The final feminist forebear and fierce woman is visual artist and author Faith Ringgold, who may be as well known for her children's books like Tar Beach as she is for her African American story quilts. Ringgold also is justly famous for unequivocally embracing figurative art at a time when abstract art holds sway over the entire art world. Ringgold also became a leader in the civil rights movement as well as the feminist movement, and has fought her entire life for the rights of Black artists to be seen. Faith inspires me because she never took no for an answer and never felt confined by what society, either white or Black society, was telling her to do. She was the first person ever to recommend and organize a protest against a museum for racial and gender bias. It was in the 1960s, against the Whitney Museum of Art, which some people called the Whitey Museum of Art. And a few years later, she was jailed for creating the People's Flag Show, a protest against American oppression and repression at home and abroad. Given Ringgold's history as an artist and an organizer, it is especially significant that we have one of her story quilts in the museum, and it's called Joe Baker's Bananas. For those of you who may not know much about Josephine Baker, she was a great performer. And here in Ringgold's quilt, she is performing her famous Danse Sauvage at Paris's Folies Bergère, the dance that established her as the biggest Black female star in the world of the 1920s. In her life and art, Baker was a radical who redefined notions of race and gender through style and performance in a way that continues to echo throughout art, dance, music, and fashion today, from Ringgold to Beyoncé to Prada and beyond. Moreover, she was a civil rights activist. She left the U.S. because of racism in the early years of the 20th century, and once she had established her reputation in Europe, Baker refused to perform in front of segregated audiences when she came back here to the U.S. on tour. She also was the mother of 12 adopted children, known as the Rainbow Tribe, long before Angelina Jolie. In Joe Baker's Bananas, Faith Ringgold foregrounds the issue of racial and gender equity that we all are talking about so much today, in the hope that change will come and the visual arts will help to lead the way. We all know for a fact that contemporary women artists, and especially those of color, continue to face many systemic obstacles and disparities to success, including persistent underrepresentation in museum collections and exhibitions worldwide. The 4 artists that I spoke about today, and hundreds, even thousands of others, deserve to have their stories told. Thank you to the Scheherazade Project for helping us to champion women in and through the arts. Go women and go vote.
I'm Ann Fisherworth. I live in Oxford, Mississippi. I'm sitting in my backyard right now looking at the trees in a little forest behind me. And I'd like to read you 5 very short poems today. These are from a series called The Days, which I've been working on since living in isolation once the pandemic broke out. Day 27. I wish you could be here with me in the cupped hours between darkness and darkness, where the massive pecan trees open their nubbins of leaf toward the sky, where a robin hops and bobs through the wild-furred daisies and violets scatter on the scruffy, unmown lawn. An anole skitters down the peace rose, dodging the thorns, emerald green with a throbbing pink dewlap. Bumblebees dive into the yellow snapdragon, and 2 Carolina wrens zoom past the back porch, where once again they will try to nest. This cup of light holds us, caught between darkness and darkness, though I scrub my hands raw and lie awake at night, full of dread for my children. Day 32. A young stag at dusk, white tail flicking, eating flowers heaped on a raw grave, raises his head to watch us before he vanishes slowly into the trees. Outside the kitchen window, my peace rose rides on arching stems like moons in a lead-white sky. All year, earth holds them. I ignore them. Night thickens among the branches of ginkgo, maple, willow oak, cherry, redbud, and the thicket of bamboo that surrounds this wooden house. Sometimes I am afraid. At 3, I knelt on the back seat of my mother's car, and looking out the window, I said, "There's so much to see and so little time to see it." Or so I've been told. It's like that now, watching the leaves. Bread rises in the oven. May the stag sink back into the forest. May the petals drop on the grass. Whoever you are, may you be at peace in this great silence, where only the birds speak. Speaking of birds speaking, you can hear them behind me right now. Day 65. I'm tired of saying, "Oh, the birds, listen to the birds," as once again they parcel out the sky. I want to feel how their songs are gifts, and the leggy pansies running to seed near the end of their season, and the 3 strawberries I've managed to grow, each partly rotten or eaten, the snapdragons and dianthus, mint, the orangey pink geranium, marigolds, lantanas, raindrops after storm dripping from the eaves, the squirrel that just bounded across the yard and ran up the crepe myrtle, the sloosh of cars driving past down the wet street, and a memory so early I don't even know if it's true. Myself lying in a high single bed in a hotel, watching the blurred reflection of streetlights in the window as their lozenges of color changed, hearing that same wet sloosh, the mystery that surrounds us, the otherness of lives passing on the wet street, as I lay cocooned in my parents' love, in the lights, the rain, and now here in this fraught season, the fine mesh and delicate tracery of leaves on trees so huge they nearly blot out the white sky. Behind this, the battered sun, my flowers in their pots, lining the old brick walkway to the 4 steps, the porch of this ramshackle Mississippi house, the rocking chair. Day without number. I will leave now. You must go to the Valley of Ashes and find there the woman with the wooden comb. She will tell you what to do. The time is 4:44, death's number. But if you go now, you may travel safely. The birds have stopped singing. The black cat no longer scratches at the window. Set out on the road that stretches forever back to the milk, the simple bowl, the starlight night that gathers around you. What might she tell you, this woman? She might say, I was once like you. I lived between thistles and honey, far from the village, alone on the mountain. What happened? Nothing happened. I have settled into peace. You too will sleep when hope and fear are gone. Day 79. The earth will be singing louder until we hear. Do not lose courage here near the end, for the world needs you now more than ever. Be still, the girl who let the wind whip the hair around her face. Be the one full of joy who strode up the hill full of rain and morning. That is alive in you always.
Hi, my name is Anita Casavantes Bradford. I am an Associate Professor of Chicano Latino Studies and History at UC Irvine, and I'm submitting a video today to the Scheherazade Project featuring 2 spoken word pieces from a musical that I recently co-wrote with a friend of mine. The musical is called Refugee Songs, A Musical Journey, and it follows a young Persian boy whose family fled Iran after the 1979 revolution. To Philadelphia, where he struggled to grow up, negotiate his identity as a refugee, as a Persian American, and deal with the changes to his family as a result of the trauma of being uprooted. The musical features spoken word, obviously live music performances, and the spoken word pieces are performed by a chorus of what we called refugee poets, who are themselves performers that are refugees or the children of refugees or forced migrants. So in the video that is attached, you will see Mashid Hager and Eliza Hugie, 2 of our lovely poets, performing 2 pieces. The first one is entitled The Body Remembers, and it opens the show as an invocation of childhood in Iran before the revolution. And the second piece, Sometimes When I'm With You, I Forget I'm a Refugee, which is the story of falling in love and how love helps us to feel at home wherever we are. Enjoy.
The body remembers.
The body remembers sand under 4-year-old feet, sunlight and heat. It remembers laughter, running and stumbling, a ball bouncing into the street.
It remembers the evening light fading, The smell of chicken cooking, women singing, hands clapping, the murmur of adult voices, my mother's touch, eyes heavy before falling asleep.
The body remembers where it comes from. It remembers the color and taste and sound of happiness. It remembers what safety felt like. It remembers home. Sometimes when I'm with you, I forget I'm a refugee.
There's no reason you should get me like you do. We've only been together a minute, but it's like you just get it, like you already see me, maybe more clearly than I see myself.
There is no reason you should get me, but you do. Maybe because you're from someplace else too, or because you got left alone a lot as a kid, or you sucked at math, or you had that acne in high school.
Whatever the reason, you already know how I like my coffee, that I'm afraid of spiders, what I'm like when I forget my medication, that I secretly wish I was taller. For whatever reason, you know what it feels like to have a permanent hole inside your heart, what it feels like, this constant aching, this wanting back something you never had to begin with.
Sometimes when I'm with you, I forget I'm a refugee. I feel like somebody who's funny and good looking and smart. I feel like I'm good at my job, like I'd be a good mother, like I've got thoughts and ideas that matter. Sometimes when I'm with you, I forget about my accent,
About all the sideways glances.
what people think facial hair means when my dad grows it.
I forget I'm not from here, what we went through to get here, how lonely I was till I met you.
Sometimes when I'm with you, I believe in the future.
I feel like an artist.
I feel complete. I forget I'm a refugee, the extra pounds I still carry. I forget I'm a Muslim,
That I'm Middle Eastern,
that I'm illegal.
that I'm black. I feel like somebody, I feel like a person who's cherished and precious and free.
You see all of me. You want all of me. You love all of me. And for a minute, I forget that I'm a refugee.
We know the difference between a president and a king. The corruption, the obstruction. You try to get away with everything. We know the difference between the truth and the lies. We're calling you out now. Then beneath November skies, we're gonna vote your asses out. We're gonna make a world where all our voices count. We'll keep fighting back in every way, and then we'll vote your asses out. We know the difference between a leader and a fake. You failed in this pandemic. Now all our lives are at stake. You held up a Bible, then you threatened to kill. We'll remember in November Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Emmett Till. We're gonna vote your asses out. We're gonna make a world where all our voices count. We'll keep fighting back in virus, what a bore. Badgeless cops, tanks and streets, bunker visits, tantrum tweets. All your cronies cross the land, trying to stop us best they can. Flashbang, tear gas, pepper spray, we'll take you down election day. Between the promise of this land and the workers' empty pockets and the unhoused empty hands, we hold the vision. Read our writing on the wall. Another world is possible. True justice for all. And we're gonna vote your asses out. We're gonna make a world where all our voices count. We'll keep fighting back in every way. And then we'll vote your asses out. Yeah, we'll vote your asses out.
Hello. Thank you for joining us here tonight. My name is Eileen Chong, and I'll be sharing a couple of spoken word poems with you. This first one is called A Legacy of Daughters. If you cage a soul, it will tear itself to pieces to fit through the bars. It will starve itself to become smaller. It will chew up its own limbs to escape. If you bolt the doors shut, it will leap out the window into the next thing to take it away. It will board a plane and fly over the ocean. It will slam the car door shut and take the time to lock the door but not put on a seatbelt. It will run from your cage into another. Yours is only the first cage of many. You will watch her settle into her new nest and begin building smaller cages to prepare. Because dogs were not domesticated overnight, this is an intergenerational art. It is better to have daughters because no matter how far or how furiously they run, daughters come back, even when they know better. She picks up the shards of her own heart, stuffs them into her pockets wherever and whatever will fit. She's gathered herself as best as she can because no one will do it for her. But like the broken bits on the kitchen floor, too small for the eye that you find with your foot, something is left behind to hurt later. This next piece is called Natural Disaster. We're clever. We know better. We waded through the aftermath of disaster weather together. Mom was a hurricane, Dad was a landslide, and two wrongs don't make a right, they collide. Run inside. Shut the doors, close the blinds, not to hide, but to keep the damage from making it outside. Heavy silence. Storm clouds on horizon forecast another fight, and flight is not an option when your job is to witness and step in. Your body's the sandbags when the elements threaten to get too dangerous. The apocalypse is small. It can fit inside a house. The grass grew back so we picnic. doesn't change the fact that the plates have shifted, are shifting, crushing us under the pressure to find a lover, nothing like what we can remember, to unmake ourselves from what we were built to resemble. I don't want to be the aftershock of the marriage that crumbled. We're clever. We should be able to do better. Ask my sister why she got married at the courthouse and didn't tell us, no family there to support her. Ask another why she stayed so long even though it was slow torture. Ask my brother why it's so hard to find someone worth to hurt for. Ask my parents why they got divorced when they did, when we were already grown and it was too late to change the course of their kids. Ask me how I stick around and yet never put roots down. Ask me how I run away yet managed to stay in place, lived my soul out of a bag in case of emergency, so I can't let my heart grow too big or too heavy to carry. You ask me why I don't build? It's just gonna come down anyway. Takes one good storm to wipe out years of what you made. When you live day by day, tomorrow is the same as yesterday. I can see the shore. I think I'll just stay here. Still can't swim, though people tried to teach me, and floating is even easier than drowning. Say what you will, an earthquake is still a mover and shaker. In 1985, the hurricane, my mother, crossed the Pacific, grew mythic, and tore a path where the land wouldn't accept her, so this is just my conjecture. There are worse things than a natural disaster. The deadliest thing? Stagnant water. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay healthy, stay safe, and take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Good night.
Hello, my name is Tyrese Coleman, and I'm here in lovely Silver Spring, Maryland. I will be reading from my collection, How to Sit, which was a 2019 PEN America Open Book finalist. You can find How to Sit at your local bookstore or small press distributor, or you can search for it along with all of Mason Jar Press's lovely collection of work at masonjarpress.xyz. The first piece I will be reading is called Why I Let Him Touch My Hair. I sat beside a white boy in a dead bar. Alone, he slurped beer, watched football. Hair yellow like an unpeeled onion. No signs of sun on his skin. A typical white boy. No match for me, yet I started it. Impressed him with what I knew white boys liked. Metallica, tits, Seinfeld. He was nice. Bored, I guess. We talked for a while, both in our 20s, both Southerners. I desired his attention because he didn't give it freely. He spoke anxiously. An awkward laugh followed every statement, every eyeball dash in my cleavage, each concerned glance upward at the wild black kinks springing from my head, and then each nervous scan behind him, around the room. His fear empowered me. In 5th grade, I fought a white boy beside a stack of gym mats. He touched me down there. I looked like a China doll, my aunt had said, fingering my jet black hair. Sizzled straight, it framed slender shoulders, stuck against my skin, my hair, grease, and sweat. She favored me. They all favored me. Lighter than my cousins, my honey complexion drew their wrath. White girl, you think you cute. Headaches from pulled hair, arm scratches from fighting. I fought him. At least I tried. We never played together. He chased me around the gym, cornered his prey. We were children, just children, and maybe to him that was what children did. But there was authority to his touch, an exerted right, his God-given right to me, because I was pretty. He said I was pretty for a black girl. Another laugh, another glance around. My new friend took in my hair again, so I asked him what he thought about it. He said it was cool. I scooted closer to him, my cleavage slow dancing in his eyes, up, down, out, in, with every breath. I offered, "Do you want to touch it?" We had an audience, another black woman beside me. I ignored her. Her disapproving stare should have told me something. The way she shook her head at herself. I offered him again, "Do you want to touch it?" A white man used to visit my grandmother. He was married with kids my age. He drove a red truck, flying down our dirt road like it was his. I'd get home from school or playing and see his truck in the yard. The rule, don't go in that house when that truck in the yard. Middle of the day, face red with sweat. I remember him flushed and always smiling, brown mullet glued against his neck. He'd walk right on in the house, no knocking or nothing, as if it were his. I grew up in front of him. By 13, he looked at me funny, but most grown men did. Now he'd come, and I'd leave, or I'd stay, and he'd give my grandma the money right in front of me. Winches, what we were called during slavery. And without me seeing it, I knew he did that every time. Every time he gave my grandma money like she was his. In college, I let the white boys I worked with see my tits. We were friends. The bar was slow. I wasn't the only girl flashing my breasts that day. It was all right. The title, The Black Girl. The one and only, surrounded by white boys. The conversation, the color of my nipples. Were they coffee colored with large areolas? Were they saggy National Geographic tits? I laughed. We were friends. It was all right because of that time that drunk guy called me a nigger and they threw him out. Cool because they liked to rap. Were from Baltimore or Philly. Their boy was black. White boys who talked about the Asian hostess's sushi. White boys who said they never date a black girl even if she was pretty for one, or friends first. White boys who wanted to party with my black friends after work, 3, 4 in the morning, and when I said no, they're sleeping. White boys who demanded I wake their nigger asses up. White boys who refused to apologize. But we were friends though. Now, at a different bar, a different white boy extended a shaky hand toward me. I lowered my head. Who knows what I expected being petted would feel like. His touch was surprisingly soft. He rubbed my hair, only bending the ends. Done, he cried, "I did it!" His accomplished smile, my power disappeared, if it had ever existed to begin with. And this last piece I'm going to read for you is called I've Been Changed. Mighty Clouds of Joy played in my Sesame Street cassette player the old folks had stolen for their party. The room, tight with drink and singing, sucked light like my aunt's burgundy-painted lips wrapped around a Virginia Slim. I saw the room through a haze of gray cigarette smoke. A side table lamp lit the room in gold, romantic to my 8-year-old eyes. Uncle Pick and Cousin Babysis squared off in competing stances, arms and mouths wide, voices whiskey warmed in the dark rectangle that was my aunt's living room turned sanctuary. Pick sat. The rounded end of his stomp poked out his shorts as it bobbed up and down, as if it still had a calf, as if it still had a foot, as if the heel of that foot stomped to the beat as the other full leg remained unmoved, thinking it didn't need to work. Once, I sat on the floor next to that stump and took his full glass of Color the Coke after ice melts and downed it without asking. He watched me gag from the fire, cough orange-red flames from my chest. He scolded, "That's what your little ass get." And I ran away before he could grab my arm and smack it. The songs were not hymns we sang at church, and I wondered had they made them up. These were lyrics about sinners overcoming sin, holding to God's unchanging hand. They sang as drunks do, oblivious, full of misplaced heart, of unconstrained emotions that warped their faces in twists of pain or happiness. I couldn't tell what. I know I've been changed. And Baby Sis took my face in her hand, her fingertips wet and cold as she smeared a thumb across my cheek. She was a vet too, like Uncle Pick. Korean War for her, Vietnam for him. Now they both sang, drank strong brown, and were too loud. argued about who had it harder. Pick saying baby sis, being a woman, didn't know what she was talking about, needed to sit her ass down. And baby sis, well, she wasn't afraid to knock a cripple out. Pick moved me onto his lap. I watched his hands, his fingers swole, fat all the way down like burnt brown hot dogs, flickered as if playing a piano in the air. He clapped with hollow claps, and I thought maybe his palms couldn't uncurl, so used to having a Flintstones glass or cleaned out jelly jar topped full of strong brown inside them. They didn't know how to flatten or smack and make sounds anymore. This is why I was never afraid of him. No matter how much he screamed in his sleep or fussed when I dropped things and made loud noises, or when, after taking what he said was his medicine, his eyes were glassy and wet, searching for something on the walls only he could see. Baby sis did stomping for him. Her short, curly afro seemed glistened, appearing wet in a mist of smoke. She stood in the middle of the living room, shaking the slat floors and vibrating the small house, about ready to bring down the curio, so that my aunt had to say, "Calm down, bae. Calm down now." She sang for Fergie, her best friend she'd met in Korea. Fergie, round and brown as my uncle said, was the only one who could calm baby sis when she was drunk and looking for a fight. When she cried her mama didn't love her no more. When she feared going to hell and told my grandma not to change clothes in front of her because God hadn't healed her sickness yet. Then one day, Fergie didn't come around anymore. Tears filled the valley of baby sis's face. She begged God to relieve her, to take away the feelings. She knelt before me, took my arm, pressed her eyes into the soft flesh inside my forearm. Uncle Pick jerked me back. "Don't you touch her." My aunt pried me from their hands. I bit the inside of my cheek, tasted blood, but the tang could have been just the smoke. And the memories they fought for absolution, memories that dripped from those songs with hanging melodies like cliffs we all could jump from. I know now why they both wanted to hold me. My small body was an altar to offer worship, to fill up with their sin or at least bear witness to it, so that in some way I could take it away. Sometime later, when I hold my children tight to my breast, my skin hot from drinking all day, I will wish I could pour my sins into them and know I too have been changed. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Holly. This is my essay, Someone's Daughter. The pro-life movement is defined by generosity, compassion, and love for women and unborn children. Vice President Mike Pence, August 5th, 2020. What does generosity look like? You approach the squat building, heart thudding in your chest. The website promised, "You don't have to do this alone," in cheery pink letters, but you feel very alone. Your friends are back at the bachelorette party. They're going to a SoulCycle class and brunch, while you're spending the morning at this pregnancy center. You rehearse what you want to say one more time. "My boyfriend and I aren't ready for this. We can't afford it. I'd have to drop out of grad school." Nothing about this story is untrue. The only lie is that you're scared you might be pregnant. You take a deep breath, check that the recorder in your purse is on, and push the door open. The air inside is stale, like an office building that hasn't been aired out since the 1970s. You enter the low-ceilinged waiting room. Stacks of infant formula teeter behind the reception desk. You notice 2 baby dresses hanging from the door, their faded fabric suggesting they've been there at least 2 decades. The Virgin Mary and several chubby angels stare down from the walls as you shift from foot to foot, waiting. Finally, a slight woman with dark hair emerges from the back. "Hello," she speaks softly, warmly, just on the border of simpering. "I'm Veronica. You must be Violet." "That's right. You made the appointment under a false name, the one you wanted to adopt when you were 6 and obsessed with the boxcar children." You nod, and Veronica leads you to a counseling room. Baby toys are arranged on the floor, a stack of alphabet blocks next to a race car track. You sit tentatively on the couch, under the watchful eye of yet more cherubs. Veronica closes the door, and with it, all thoughts of escaping to join your friends at brunch. She sits in a chair opposite you, across the floor of toys. "Is this your first visit here?" You nod again. "How old are you? Are you married, single, or divorced? When was the first day of your last period?" Veronica's gentle concern quickly gives way to probing insistence, although her smile never falters. Have you ever worked with a psychologist? Do you live with the father of the baby? What's his name? How old is he? How long have you been living together? How does he feel about you being pregnant? Does he work? What does he do? What are your religious preferences? For once, your anxiety works in your favor. Your shaky voice and constant fidgeting are perfect for a young woman who's scared she may be pregnant and doesn't know what to do. And Veronica's real purpose here is not to be gentle. It's to convince you that you shouldn't get an abortion. Like every other not quite kindly staff member at the nearly 60 crisis pregnancy centers in Virginia, her goal is to make sure you keep your pregnancy. They lure you in with offers of free diapers, baby clothes, formula, and pregnancy tests, like the one you're here to take. The price for this generosity? Your freedom to make the choice that's best for you. What does compassion look like? Before she'll give you the pregnancy test, Veronica needs to counsel you. What's happening now is that a lot of people are using contraception because you want to postpone pregnancy. A lot of times later on when you want to have babies, then you might have problems, she explains. This is a lie. There are many risks to abortion, different levels of risk, depending how far along you are and what type of procedure you have, also where you go for the abortion, and also your health. Some women have died from abortion. This is a lie. There's women who suffer from depression and anxiety after their abortions. There's more incidents of things, for example, like suicide. This is a lie. Throughout it all, Veronica keeps smiling and jotting down notes. After 30 minutes or so, she sends you to pee in a cup so that she can do your pregnancy test. She promises that it's more accurate than what you would buy at the pharmacy. This is almost certainly a lie too, but you can't be sure because she won't tell you the name of the test or let you see the box. You'd bet money that she bought it from the CVS next door. That's the thing. This center, like most crisis pregnancy centers, has no medical license. It's staffed by church volunteers with no medical background, and they're not bound by any of the regulations that legitimate medical clinics have to follow. They can tell you anything they want. Somehow, this doesn't stop them from receiving public funding. In Virginia, crisis pregnancy centers get revenue from the state for every single crayon stick figure on every single blaringly yellow "Choose Life" license plate on the road. You can't think about that now, though, because it will ruin your nervous, "please don't let me be pregnant" facade. You wait for Veronica to return with the test results, scanning the room for details that you'll include in your post-visit report to NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia. Finally, Veronica comes back into the room. She fixes you with an earnest gaze, and you think she's about to tell you that you're not pregnant, because, of course, you're not. Instead, she says, "Tell me about your partner. Have you talked about marriage?" Oh no. You reply that it's come up before, but neither of you were really ready. Veronica is ready, though. She comes back at you with, "What do you think he would say if you told him, 'Let's not have any more sex until we get married'?" You don't know how to answer that, but you don't have to. Veronica's here to talk, not listen. She proffers a pamphlet called "Is It Love?" Inside is a quiz for you and your partner to take together to test your marriage readiness. Scanning it quickly, you see that you get 2 bonus points if both of you are willing to abstain from sex until marriage. Sex has stunted your relationship, apparently. It just takes off and you stop really getting to know each other, Veronica explains. Only when you're married do you reintroduce sex into your relationship, and then you can rely on natural family planning to avoid getting pregnant. Just get to know your body, and then you do what is natural to your body, she assures you. You bite the inside of your lip to keep your disdain from flickering across your face. Only when you agree to propose abstinence to your partner will Veronica reveal that your pregnancy test was negative. By this point, you've been at the center for almost an hour. Your relief at the news is real. It means this meeting is coming to an end. Loaded down with literature and bad advice, you leave the hushed beige of the office block for the summer sun. What does love for women look like? It's still dark when you arrive at the clinic for the early shift. Looking out the front door, you groan when you realize that the protesters are already parading down the sidewalk. You know you're lucky. This clinic has a front parking lot that's considered private property, so the protesters have to stay on the sidewalk. They can't rush at patients trying to come inside, but they have other ways of making themselves known. This morning's crew is small so far. There are the 2 questionably close middle-aged men who just walk back and forth, reciting prayers to themselves and every so often throwing you a dirty look. They're mostly harmless. Then you see Matt, and your stomach drops slightly. He's out there with Bullhorn at the ready, even though it's not even 7 o'clock yet, propping low-resolution images of melted baby dolls up on the bus shelter. You sigh and pull on your orange clinic escort vest like it's a suit of armor, then head out into the mid-December drizzle. Matt's Bullhorn-propelled monologue assaults your ears as you emerge into the raw morning. The people of God are here for you. We'll help you. It's not too late to be a good mother, he beseeches the windows. Right now, you're in danger of burning in hell. You breathe deeply. At least this time, he isn't running after a car as it pulls out of the parking lot, banging on the windows and demanding the driver go inside and pick up the patient they just dropped off. Turn away from your wickedness. Turn away from your selfishness, he continues, pausing whenever a large truck whizzes by on the busy road. You're trapped in a selfish lifestyle that drives you to murder babies because you want sex but you don't want responsibilities. Take responsibility for the sex that you have. You're in danger of everlasting torment right now. You're pretty sure that everlasting torment is being trapped in a room with Matt and his Bullhorn. When he realizes that there aren't any patients to abuse, Matt turns his attention to you and your fellow volunteers. Are you really that stupid to think that baby isn't alive? He asks. Are you that mentally retarded? Maybe I need to give you a biology lesson. You shuffle your feet and refuse to make eye contact. Taking deep breaths helps you keep your face like a mask. Wicked, evil, pathetic little cowards who can't stand up for what's right, he spits in your direction before comparing you to Nazis and slave owners. When the next car pulls into the parking lot, you plant yourself in between the driver's door and Matt. Don't worry about him, you assure the tiny woman behind the wheel when she hesitates. He can't leave the sidewalk. He can't, but you still feel him behind you. You've made yourself the focus of his attention now. This is a wicked woman who leads people in to murder babies, he shouts. Don't listen to anything she says. You let the words run off you like the raindrops as you smile at the driver and make a remark about the weather to distract her. As she walks inside, Matt gets quieter. Why are you such a wicked woman? He asks your back. What drives you? Stop being such a hateful bigot. His words slam into your body. You just absorb the abuse because that is your job. Deflect attention from patients so they can get in the door quickly and safely. But when you go home and take your orange vest off, it feels heavy with the weight of so many insults and accusations. Insults and accusations from strangers who crow that you're going to burn in hell simply because you're on one side of the parking lot and they're on the other. Because you want to give people the power to decide their own futures, and they think that makes you a wicked harlot. You exchange your vest for gym clothes and hit the treadmill. You focus on how the breath moves through your body, how your muscles work to propel you forward. Several miles later, your body feels like yours again, baptized in your own sweat. So yes, you've seen the pro-life movement's generosity, compassion, and love for women. You're intimately familiar with them. And as long as they are on the other side of that parking lot, you'll be out there standing in their way. Thank you.
Thank you to all the sisters. We may be wrapping up the hashtag 101 Nights campaign on Election Day, but the Scheherazade Project will continue beyond this one event. We've gathered such an incredible community of strong, fierce, creative women whose voices and art can continue to change the world for the better. There's so much work to do. First, let's finish this job. Make sure your vote counts. Thank you to our generous donors. With your donations, we have been able to purchase video editing, transcription, and live stream scheduling software. We've been able to secure equipment like tripods, projector, lights, microphones. We've been able to upgrade social media accounts to business and Premiere. These are just a few examples of how your donation made it possible for us to produce hashtag 101 Nights. Without you, we couldn't have shifted our original plan of live performances in front of the White House to streamed performances online. Help us sustain and grow this beloved community by donating money, volunteering time, or by telling your friends about us. With your help, we'll be able to provide a wider platform for artists, produce higher quality videos, publicize our activism to bring voices to a wider audience, pay our interns, and hire an executive director. Please consider supporting us.
The stories that we share will live on until we say these truths are our gifts passed on to you. Women.